So, since my channel is getting a few new members, and it's all about getting a third series going, I thought I should explain what this series means to me. But first, I want to tell you a little story about myself real quick. I'm a writer living in Los Angeles, and I've been writing since I was 7 years old. When I was in the 2nd grade, our teacher gave us a book to read called The Capture. It was about a baby barn owl that was kidnapped by an adult owl and taken to a place with thousands of other baby owls where they were being brainwashed. And it was the first book I ever really liked. The first that really showed me what a good story could do. I only had one problem with it. All the characters were owls, and I thought it'd be cooler if they were all sorts of birds of prey. So I wrote my own version. And over the years it would change and evolve. And so would how I wrote. But my writing didn't really change until I saw The Last Airbender. It came out in 2005 when I was 10. But I didn't have cable, so I missed out on it, as well as a lot of other shows that our generation grew up on. Growing up, though, I would occasionally hear something about Last Airbender. And it took me till 2015 that I finally got around to watching it. I was 20, no longer a kid. Now, by then I had seen a lot of other movies and shows that people considered their favorites. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, and so on. And while I liked all of those franchises, they never really hit me the same way The Capture did. That book I read when I still was a child. I didn't think about why though. I didn't realize that they just weren't hitting me as hard as I should have. All the while, I was still working on that same idea with the birds of prey, only by now they were griffins. Anyway, it was sometime around January or February of 2015 that I actually watched The Last Airbender. And it hit me the way nothing ever had before. Except maybe The Capture, but maybe even more than that. And while there's a lot of things that make Last Airbender good, the world building, the awesome fights, and of course, the great characters, there was one thing that, for me at least, elevated the show from good to great. That elevated it above all those other franchises. I had never seen anything that had something like Zuko's arc. Now I had seen stuff with good arcs, but none like his. His was unique. I love redemption arcs. I've always loved redemption arcs. Thing is, before this show, I didn't know I loved them. Now, I'm going to be talking about why I love redemption arcs, specifically Zuko's, but I want to clarify what a redemption arc is. A good redemption arc shows you that, deep down, a character is good, but they've been forced into a bad situation. Forced to do bad things, and you can see that they don't like doing them. Now, you don't have to show their regret immediately. For example, with Anakin's redemption, he's introduced to be a villain through and through, but by Jedi, we see that he does have remorse. It just took being reunited with his son to bring it out of him, to remind him that he's still a human. But Zuko's arc was obviously done very differently. We see from the beginning that he is not evil, that he is good, but feels like he has to do bad. But there's something else we see in Last Airbender. We see that others assume he's evil, when we know the truth, and that makes us sympathize with him even more. And that, I think, is what drew me to Zuko the most. See, when I was young, I was pretty much one of those kids who was by himself, and so I was labeled the outcast. People thought one thing of me, but I knew I was another. And to be clear, I'm not trying to make this sound like a sob story or badass or anything. Really, I was just socially awkward and shy. My point is that I had seen plenty of heroes, but I had never seen one for me, and he started off as a villain. And once more, I didn't even know that that was what I wanted. I know Iroh is everyone's favorite, but like I said earlier, Zuko was the one who made the show go from good to great. He introduced me to something that I didn't even know existed, and it completely changed how I write. I didn't know a character could be so deep and have so much complexity to them. Which I guess is a lesson to any fellow writers watching. If you want to make something great, you need something that you think is great to draw on. I mean, I know I'm just repeating myself, but we were introduced to someone who we knew was good but was forced to do bad, goes on this soul-finding journey, fights a literal manifestation of his equal and opposite self, someone who was what he thought he wanted to be. A prodigious child, someone who wasn't a screw-up, and who actually got their father's approval, being the person who showed him what he and only he could have become. And, in the end, he finally battles and defeats the person who embodies his demons, thus symbolically defeating them, as well as, more literally, finally defeating the one person who always manipulated, outshined, and, until now, always defeated him. Oh no! Wait a minute! He doesn't defeat Azula. Freaking Katara does! Okay, this is a problem no one talks about. And you know, it reminds me of something else. When I watched Last Airbender for the first time, I went right into Korra. And although I had some problems with it, I remember thinking, well, there's no way anyone actually hates... Oh my god! Okay, here's the thing. If I'm going to write a pilot for a third series, I think I should address the elephant in our fanbase. I think it's time that someone, once and for all, figured out why Legend of Korra has such a different effect on different people. Now, in my video about why Korra isn't a Mary Sue, which you should watch because it's probably the best thing ever made, I divided the fanbase into 3 main camps. Just to go over them real quickly, the first camp is made of people who loved Last Airbender and really liked Legend of Korra, the second camp was made of people who thought Korra was just okay, and the third and smallest is made of people who hated it. So from now on, I'm just going to refer to Korra haters as third campers because it's just a more neutral term. Anyway, I bet all the third campers are probably thinking that Korra hates differently because it's just bad. But Korra isn't one of those things that's universally loved or hated. Most people at least think Korra is okay, but then the third campers do make up a sizable portion of the fanbase, probably around a fifth or so. Which means that this Discord has more to do with us than the actual show. Again, if Korra was something that was universally loved or hated, then it'd be fair to say that the show is either doing something very right or very wrong, but that's obviously not the case. I think one thing everyone can agree on is that Korra just feels different. But why? I mean, why does it feel different, not why does everyone agree on it? Anyway, I think the most obvious thing is that this show has a different conflict with each season. But that can't be the only reason. Well, Last Airbender starts off in a very traditional way for a fantasy. You have this big war with this big villain who's trying to take over the world, and it's all in media res. And then, of course, there's the Chosen One. He gets discovered and has to train and prepare before the big final showdown with the big bad. Yeah. But Korra? Not even a little bit. There is no big conflict or big bad, and she doesn't feel like a Chosen One who the world's been waiting on. She basically just feels like an average person. And I think it's safe to say that some people like one thing, whereas some people like the other, and some people are just good either way. Oh, but maybe I'm just using the excuse that third campers just wanted Last Airbender all over again. Okay, well, remember what I said earlier? About how the reaction to the show has been love, hate, and everything in between? Which means that it comes down to us, meaning our personal tastes. So what, it's our personal taste to have love triangles and protagonists who randomly regress? That's not what I'm saying, and I'll get into the main complaints about Korra in a little while. But first, I just want to talk about the other thing that makes the show just feel different at a fundamental level. You see, Last Airbender was a very spiritual show, and it had politics kind of in the background. But Korra does the opposite. It's well known that each season covers one of the 4 main ideologies. But they focus on 2 different things, so the hell why? Well, spirituality is a really emotional process, but politics is more intellectual. So, because you're using your intellect instead of your emotions, you'll get a different feeling. Not to mention the fact that anything with emotions automatically feels deeper. And there's one final thing, the new team avatar. I think this is another thing that everyone can agree on, even people who love Korra, and that's that the new team avatar just doesn't work as well as the original one. And the thing about any avatar show is that its team avatar is its foundation, and if the foundation isn't great, then it affects everything else. It means that everything else has to compensate, but I have to say, it kind of does. I talked about this in my interview with Shredder FTW, which you should also watch by the way because it's awesome, that the writers actually did a really good job with all the secondary characters. I mean, Tenzin, Linge, Nora, and Sue especially. And even the 4 members of the new team avatar. They each do work very well on their own, except Mako. It's just as a team, maybe not as much. They work well. What about Korra? She's bratty, selfish, and her arc is just all over the place. But here's the thing, those aren't invalid points. But here's my point. For all the problems that Legend of Korra has, Last Airbender, despite being an excellent show, has almost as many. What? Yes, I know. But remember how like a million years ago, I said that the reception of the show basically came down to our taste? Well, what if your taste makes you more likely to dislike Korra? It's a well-known psychological phenomenon that when you dislike something, you tend to mostly see the flaws, and vice versa for something you like. So if you don't like Legend of Korra's setup, the flaws it already has just get even more exaggerated. Oh, don't believe me? Okay, well, since we're talking about protagonists, remember how in the pilot of Last Airbender, Aang just wants to have fun and goof off, and to not deal with the responsibilities of being the Avatar, only to learn that his people were in fact murdered by the Fire Nation? And then, do you remember how after that he stopped goofing off and got right down to training, fueled by a righteous anger for the deaths of his people, not to mention the knowledge that the longer it takes him to get ready, the more people suffer, and he trained so hard and so restlessly that he was able to fight and defeat Ozai long before Sozin's Comet, making sure that that wasn't a crisis on top of a crisis? Yeah, I don't remember that second part either. I mean, he learns that his people were all killed. In the very next episode, he goes to Kyosha Island to ride the freaking koi fish. I mean, they were only the people who raised you and the whole world is suffering, but okay. Now, I know what some people are going to say, that that's the point of his personality. He doesn't want to be the Avatar, he's a reluctant hero. The point is that it's too much pressure to put on a kid. Well, yes, defeating the Fire Nation and Ozai is a lot of pressure. But you'd think that the murder of his people would drown out any fears he had before, right? I mean, he spends the entire series seeing the suffering that the Fire Nation was causing, and yet he keeps goofing off. Even in Book 3, he throws that stupid dance party. People are still suffering, Aang. I guess you could say he just needed some time off. Except that he just woke up from a coma, and he's still seen all this suffering firsthand. So you'd think his anger from that would drive him even more, but again, guess not. Talk about a character stagnating. And there's a million other things I can point out. Like the fact that lightning bending takes total peace of mind, yet Azula is able to do it after, just hallucinating her mom and then screaming at said hallucination.
You think I'm a monster?
I think you're confused. All your life you've used fear to control people, like your friends May and Ty Lee.
Well, what choice do I have? Trust is for fools. Fear is the only reliable way. Even you fear me.
No, I love you, Azula. I do.
Some call lightning the cold-blooded fire. It is precise and deadly, like Azula. To perform the technique requires peace of mind.
Anyway, or how about Ozai's plan in the finale? I mean, does he really expect to ride across a continent the size of Asia in a single day? On a blimp? Yeah, that's his plan. He's going to use the power boost from Sozin's Comet to burn down the entire Earth Kingdom, which is about the size of Asia, while on a blimp which is going about 50 miles an hour. I mean, imagine driving from Istanbul to Beijing in a day on a car that has a speed limit of 50 miles per hour. Yeah. But what's my point in all this? My point is that yeah, Korra has flaws, but so does Last Airbender. And they're both very good shows. I mean, one more than the other, but still. And again, if you've decided something's good, then you're less likely to see the flaws. And if you've decided something's bad, then the flaws are what your mind will mostly look for. I'm just saying, it is possible that maybe you missed the stuff I just pointed out. And if you did, then maybe you missed a few other things. Besides the whole Last Acting Kai thing. Okay, there's actually one last thing I wanted to say, but didn't think of it until a week after I'd written the initial script. Anyway, there's one last reason why Last Airbender and Korra just feel different. And it's the simplest, but also I think the biggest reason. Like I said earlier, Last Airbender is very traditional fantasy, and what does every fantasy have? The journey. Now, we've all watched many fantasies and/or adventures and got that same bubbly feeling in our stomachs when our heroes start off on their quest. But this, of course, requires physical movement across great distances. But in Book 1 of Korra, we're stuck in the same city the entire time. Even in the latter books, where we do move around, there is never any set destination established in the beginning of the season. And again, if people did come into the show wanting one thing, whether they knew it or not, and then got the exact opposite, it means Legend of Korra is starting off on the wrong foot for them. Factor in all the other stuff I've covered, and it's pretty obvious why people wanted one thing, then got something completely different, and so didn't like Legend of Korra. Which is why they see so many flaws and so few merits, and vice versa for Last Airbender. Anyway, sorry for going on a tangent, but I just needed to get that out. But the reason why goes back to the whole Last Acting Kai thing and what it reminded me of. It reminded me that Korra gets a lot of hate and doesn't deserve half of it. Because that show means something to me too. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to have a lot of things to say about this, so by all means, leave your comments below. I will say this though, as far as things that make Korra feel different, it definitely doesn't have anything quite like Zuko. But then again, what does? Like I said earlier, he was the one who elevated the show from good to great for me. He was the one who showed me that characters could be beyond what I previously thought. My real point is that this changed how I write. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm a writer. And also, like I said, if you want to be a good writer, you need something that makes you feel a certain way. Honestly, I've only experienced this 2 other times outside of Last Airbender and Korra. Once with Young Justice, and the other time with Castlevania. Which, seriously, if you're an Avatar fan, you're gonna love Young Justice and Castlevania. But even they didn't hit as hard as Last Airbender. And that's almost certainly because of Zuko. Legend of Korra hit really hard too, but in a really different way. See, pretty much every fantasy can be divided into two categories. Either it's in the modern world but the magic's hidden, or the magic's out in the open but it's in the Middle Ages. Legend of Korra is one of the only times I've ever seen a magic system that's out in the open, but in a semi-modern world. I got through Last Airbender in about 3 months, and like I said, it changed me. And that was because I really didn't know what to expect. And Korra did the exact same thing. When we see Republic City, with its cars and its technology, for the first time, it just blew me away, but at the same time it made sense. We saw that the Fire Nation was already industrialized in Last Airbender, and that was 70 years ago. So of course, this is what the world looks like now. A show that can surprise the hell out of you, but the surprise makes sense? One that can give you that "oh" feeling is a good show. I loved how everything felt more evolved, more advanced. Korra made this world feel even more real than it already had in Last Airbender. Similar to what I said earlier, every other fantasy is just set in the Middle Ages and it just stays there. And it's almost never the classical age or the industrial age. It's always the Middle Ages with the epic fantasy. But Korra, didn't do that, and it was awesome. Now I know that a lot of people have a lot of problems with Legend of Korra and Korra herself, and I'm going to make videos about this sort of thing and everything about Avatar in general eventually, including why Korra just felt different, which I have a few more theories about. I mean, hell, if a certain topic gets enough attention in the comments, I might even make a video about that. Also, right now I'm putting my videos up for free, but that's going to change soon. I just want to build up a bit of a following, then I'm going to start putting these on Patreon. If you want to get a third series going, you can head over there and help out. Most of the money goes right to the project. If you want to know more about the series, you can watch my interview with Shredder FTW, which I'm going to attach to the end of this video. And if you want to talk to me, the comments section is the best place. So go ahead and tell me what you think and I'll reply as soon as I can. Just FYI, I'm going to be busy this week, so I'm not sure when I'm going to get another video out. Anyway, you can also share, like, subscribe, yada yada, do it or I'll send Toph to your house.